Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The children's charity Kids Company is due to close in the next hour amid questions over its finances. Ministers gave the organisation, which helps vulnerable children and young people, £3 million last week, despite concerns about the way it was managed. The charity's founder, Camilla Batman-Gerich, told the BBC that civil servants and ministers and the media were responsible for its demise and children would suffer as a result. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports. In August 1945, US planes dropped 2 atomic bombs, one on Hiroshima and 3 days later the other on Nagasaki. It was the first and only time that nuclear weapons have been used. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives as a direct result of the bombings. Now, on the eve of the 70th anniversary of Hiroshima, our special correspondent Fergal Keane has been talking to survivors of the attack. You may find some of his report distressing. Now, the Great British Bake Off, it's become a global phenomenon. And tonight, 12 new contestants, including a firefighter and a prison governor, are hoping their baking will impress the judges in the latest series on BBC One. So what's the secret of its success? Sarah Campbell's been finding out. Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A 14-year-old boy who stabbed a teacher at his school in West Yorkshire has been sentenced to up to 11 years in detention. Bradford Crown Court heard that the teenager, who can't be named because of his age, attacked Vincent Azuma in June. He was working as a supply teacher at Dixon's King's Academy. Today, Mr. Azuma, who suffered a deep wound to the stomach, said he had forgiven the teenager and wanted him to become what he called a changed person. Ed Thomas is outside the school now. Ed. Now, it's the fastest-selling show in London theatre history. People have been queuing for hours to get the chance to see the Sherlock star, Benedict Cumberbatch, play Hamlet. But it seems all the attention from fans is getting too much for the actor. Now he's pleaded with audiences not to film him while he's on stage, saying he finds the flashes and red lights very distracting. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mazimba reports. Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. 24-year-old Karen Buckley went missing in Glasgow in April after an evening out in one of the city's nightclubs. Today, a 21-year-old man admitted randomly targeting her as she left the club. He hit her repeatedly with a spanner and strangled her in his car. Alexander Pacto then tried to dispose of her body in a bath full of chemicals. Karen's father called him truly evil and said he hoped he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The search is continuing for 2 men whose boat overturned during a fishing trip in the Firth of Forth yesterday afternoon. Another man was pulled from the water but died in hospital in Dundee last night. Let's get... The technology giant Google has announced a big reorganisation of its business. They're creating a new parent company called Alphabet, which will look after its newer and more experimental businesses like driverless cars and using drones to deliver parcels. Meanwhile, the Google search engine and YouTube will remain under the Google brand, as our business correspondent Emma Simpson explains. England's women cricketers have been in action on the first day of a 4-day test against Australia in Canterbury today. The match is part of the Women's Ashes series. Patrick. A collection of behind-the-scenes photographs from the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana in 1981 is to be auctioned in the United States. 12 prints capture the newlyweds with senior royals in Buckingham Palace shortly after becoming man and wife. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell has been taking a look. Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A bomb has exploded in the centre of the Thai capital, Bangkok, killing at least 16 people and injuring dozens more. Police say the scale of the attack is unprecedented. The bomb went off outside a Hindu shrine in a busy tourist area surrounded by shops and hotels. Witnesses at the scene have described terrible injuries and devastation. The attack took place during rush hour close to the Erawan shrine in the capital's central Chidlom district. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head is there. Just a warning, you may find some of his report disturbing. Call for more help for the dairy industry. Some supermarkets have increased the price they pay for milk, but dairy farmers say they still risk making a loss and need further initiatives to support the production of other goods like cheese and yoghurt. how much money is too much? The contrast between the salaries of Britain's top executives and most full-time workers has been laid bare in a new report. It's found that top bosses earn, on average, 183 times more than a full-time worker in the UK. The research by the campaigning think tank, the High Pay Centre, also claims that the money earned in 3 days by a chief executive of one of Britain's largest companies is often the equivalent of what an average worker would earn in a whole year. Yet many say executives should be paid market rates to attract the best talent, and it is not right to make such comparisons. Our business editor Kamal Ahmed takes a look at the issue. The number of black Muslims in Britain has more than doubled in the past decade. Nearly 300,000 are living in the UK. Many are converts. At a time when Muslim extremism often dominates the headlines, some Muslim musicians are turning to hip-hop to express their views on stereotypes and stigma. Colleen Harris has been speaking to one of the leading female duos. Good evening. Welcome to the BBC News at 6. With Europe facing its biggest migrant crisis since World War II, Britain and France have signed an agreement to strengthen security around the Channel Tunnel. It includes setting up a joint police control and command centre to disrupt people smuggling gangs. More than 3,000 people are camped in Calais, hoping to cross the Channel illegally. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford reports. While in Macedonia, a state of emergency has been declared and the army has been called out to stop the flow of migrants trying to cross into Greece overland. Our correspondent Daniel Sanford is near the Eurotunnel entrance outside Calais, and it just goes to show the pressure that is being put on borders all around Europe. Have lined the streets of Liverpool to say farewell to Cilla Black. Celebrities including Sir Cliff Richard, Paul O'Grady and Sir Tom Jones joined the entertainer's friends and family for her funeral in Woolton this afternoon. The 72-year-old died earlier this month after a fall at her villa in Spain. Our correspondent Colin Patterson was at the service. The lack of homes in rural areas has been described as a scandal by the Chancellor. He's pledged to extend the government's starter home scheme for first-time buyers. Villages could build new homes and give a 20% discount for those with links to the area, and there'd be moves to speed up planning regulations on rural exception sites. But critics say this won't help those on the lowest incomes who won't be able to buy. Our rural correspondent Claire Marshall is in Devon. The Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is expected to resign this evening, causing a snap election to be held next month. Mr Tsipras has faced a rebellion within his ruling Syriza party over a new financial bailout which has been agreed with international creditors. Now, he's well known for his outspoken and distinctive graffiti art, which fetches huge sums of money. But now the artist known as Banksy has turned his talents to Weston-super-Mare. The artist's latest exhibition has been a closely guarded secret for months. Our arts correspondent David Pt02 is at Dismalland. David. Good evening. A powerful blast has killed at least 19 people in the Thai capital Bangkok and injured more than 100. The bomb went off near a well-known Hindu shrine in an area popular with tourists, packed with five-star hotels and offices. Police say the scale of the attack is unprecedented. Witnesses at the scene described terrible injuries and devastation. The Thai government says it believes foreigners were the target. The bomb went off during rush hour close to the Erawan shrine in the city centre. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head arrived at the scene minutes after the explosion. The former Foreign Secretary David Miliband has become the latest senior Labour figure to warn of the dangers of electing Jeremy Corbyn as party leader. He said the left-winger would take Labour backwards. This report from our political correspondent Vicky Young contains some flash photography. An Iraqi businessman whose family was held hostage by Islamic State militants has been helping to smuggle other hostages out of territory held by so-called Islamic State. He is part of an international smuggler network that's managed to rescue hundreds of people. However, there are concerns that the money given to smugglers to get people out is going straight to Islamic State. Our correspondent Nafisa Kunavad has the story. That's all from us. Don't forget you can get a first look at tomorrow's front pages on the BBC News channel now, and over on BBC Two in a few moments. Newsnight examines the implications for Labour of a Jeremy Corbyn victory. But now on BBC One it's time for the news where you are. Good night. Good evening. Lord Coe says he is committed to cracking down on drug cheats after he was elected as the new president of the world governing body of athletics, the IAAF. The Olympian who secured London's 2012 Games is taking control of the organisation at a time when the sport is mired in allegations of widespread doping. Today, the marathon world record holder, Paula Radcliffe, said there was no need for athletes to make their blood data public because there are risks it could be misinterpreted. Here's our sports editor, Dan Roan. His report contains some flash photography. The number of migrants reaching the borders of the European Union has hit a record high. Over 100,000 migrants arrived at the EU's borders last month, according to new figures released by its border agency. That is more than triple the amount recorded last July. Today, the German government said up to 800,000 refugees could arrive in Germany alone this year. Many of the migrants trying to make it to Europe are coming through the Balkans. There were 45,000 illegal border crossings there in the first quarter. Migrants hoping to travel on to northern Europe are congregating in border towns on the edge of Europe. Many end up here, in the town of Givgelia. Chris Buckler reports from a border town that is overwhelmed. Police in Thailand say they believe the main suspect in Monday's bomb attack in Bangkok was a foreigner who was part of a network. They've released a sketch of the man and issued an arrest warrant for him. 20 people were killed in the explosion at a shrine in the city and more than 120 were injured. Jonathan Head reports from Bangkok. Islamic State militants in Syria have murdered the man who was in charge of the famous Antiquities Museum at Palmyra. The 81-year-old, who'd spent most of his life looking after the ancient ruins of Palmyra, was beheaded. Khaled al-Assad had devoted his life to the site, which is famous around the world as one of the best preserved ancient cities. Good evening. There are growing fears about the health of the global economy after a day of market turmoil. Across the world, share prices and currencies have fallen, and the London Stock Exchange has dropped to its lowest level for 7 months. The slowdown in China, the world's second-largest economy, is being blamed. Our economics editor, Robert Peston, examines the prospects for the world's economy. All the pressure on Calais is being driven by the influx of migrants across Europe's borders, many of them fleeing conflicts in Africa and the Middle East. The war in Syria has brought a surge in people travelling through Turkey into Greece and the Balkans. The other major route to Europe is across the Mediterranean from North Africa. In the latest month, more than 100,000 migrants are believed to have entered the EU. And in recent days, our correspondents have traced the impact of that pressure on Europe's borders, from Macedonia in the Balkans to Italy and Greece. I have problems with the sound there. Now, it was a derelict seaside lido in Weston-super-Mare, and local residents thought it was being turned into a film set. But today it was unveiled as a theme park with a twist. Designed by the elusive street artist Banksy, it's called Dismal Land, and it's certainly a far cry from Disneyland, as our arts correspondent David Silito reports. Well, that is all from us. Apologies for the technical problems we had a moment ago. Over on Newsnight, there will be more on the Labour leadership campaign. And don't forget, of course, that there is a first look at the papers over on the BBC News channel. But now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.